The door. The watch was wrapped in navy blue tissue paper. I had spent 40 minutes in the store choosing the right box, the right ribbon, the right weight of paper because Daniel noticed things like that. He noticed the difference between something thrown together and something chosen with care. It was one of the things I had loved about him from the beginning. The fact that he paid attention. The watch itself was a Longines. Steel case, brown leather strap, clean white face. $640. I had seen him stop in front of a display window on Michigan Avenue 8 months earlier and look at it the way men look at things they want but won't buy for themselves. I had taken a photo of the display on my phone that same afternoon and never mentioned it. I had been waiting for the right moment. Our 5th anniversary was 2 days away. I had been in Atlanta for 4 days. A corporate strategy engagement with a financial services client that had run 3 days longer than scheduled. 4 days of airport hotels, conference room lighting, catered sandwiches, and the specific exhaustion that comes not from working hard but from being away from home while working hard. I had called Daniel every night. He had answered every night. He sounded fine. Normal. Tired in the way he always sounded tired after a long week. I landed at O'Hare at 6:14 p.m. on a Thursday. I had the watch in my carry-on. I had a handwritten letter in the front pocket of my bag. 2 pages, written longhand in the hotel room on Tuesday night because I had nothing else to do and everything I wanted to say. I had 2 printed boarding passes for Paris in an envelope tucked beside the letter. Charles de Gaulle, departing the following Saturday. 5 nights. A hotel near the Seine that I had researched for 3 weeks and booked 2 months in advance. I had planned this anniversary the way I planned everything. Carefully, completely, with no detail left to chance. The drive home from O'Hare takes 31 minutes when the traffic cooperates. That evening it cooperated. I listened to the radio. I thought about Daniel's face when he saw the Paris tickets. I thought about the restaurant I had already made a reservation at for Friday night, our actual anniversary, a place called Elaine's in the West Loop that he had mentioned once months ago in passing. I had remembered. I had booked it 6 weeks out. I turned onto our street at 6:51 p.m. That is when I saw Sara's car. A white Volkswagen Jetta. Parked directly in front of our building. I knew that car the way I knew my own reflection. I had been a passenger in it more times than I could count. Coffee runs, airport pickups, late nights after dinners that stretched past midnight because neither of us wanted to stop talking. I smiled. I remember smiling. I thought she had come to help me set up the surprise. Sara knew about the anniversary plan. She was the only person I had told because she was the only person I ever told everything. I remember thinking she had probably brought wine. She usually brought wine. I took the elevator up. I had my carry-on over one shoulder and the gift bag in my right hand. I unlocked the front door with my key and pushed it open. They were on the couch. Not hiding. Not scrambling. Not mid-explanation. Just there. Together. In the specific stillness of 2 people who have just heard a key in a lock and have had exactly 1 second to decide that there is nothing left to do. Daniel looked at me. Sara looked at me. Neither of them said a word. I stood in the doorway for what felt like a very long time. I looked at Daniel. I looked at Sara. I looked at the couch, our couch, the gray sectional we had argued about in the furniture store because I wanted the smaller one and he wanted the larger one and we had laughed about it for weeks afterward. I looked down at the gift bag in my hand. Navy blue tissue paper. A Longines watch. A handwritten letter. 2 tickets to Paris. I set the bag down on the entryway table. Picked up my carry-on. I walked back out. I did not say a single word. The elevator ride down was 22 seconds. I counted them. I don't know why I counted them. I think my brain needed something to do that wasn't feeling what it was about to feel. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 1 hour and 14 minutes. Then I drove to a Marriott 11 blocks away. Checked in with my corporate card. Went up to room 412. Sat on the edge of the bed. And stared at the wall. The gift bag was still on the entryway table. I had left it there. I don't know if I left it on purpose, but I have thought about it many times since, and I think some part of me, even in that first stunned minute, wanted him to have to look at it. Who Claire Hadley was. Let me tell you who I was before that Thursday evening. Because the story doesn't make sense without it. My name is Claire Hadley. At the time this happened, I was 34 years old, living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Square, Chicago, with a husband I had loved for 7 years and trusted completely. I was a senior corporate consultant at a firm called Meridian Strategy Group, the kind of job that sounds impressive at dinner parties and feels most days like organized chaos with a good salary. I traveled constantly, 40 weeks a year, sometimes more. I managed large-scale operational restructuring for financial and healthcare clients across the country, which is a formal way of saying I flew into broken organizations, figured out what was actually wrong and fixed it. I was good at finding what was actually wrong. Apparently not always. I had met Daniel at a rooftop birthday party in the summer of 2017. Sara had invited me. Sara had also, as I later learned, invited Daniel specifically because she thought we would get along. She introduced us over warm white wine and bad speakers playing something I can't remember. And by the end of the night, Daniel and I had talked for 3 hours and exchanged numbers, and I had driven home feeling the specific electricity of meeting someone who makes you want to be more interesting than you actually are. We were engaged 2 years later. Married the year after that. 5 years ago last Thursday. Sara was my maid of honor. I want you to understand what that means, not the title but the history behind it. Sara Novak had been my closest friend since our second year of college. 15 years. She was the person I called at 2 a.m. when my first serious relationship ended and I didn't know how to stop crying. She was in the waiting room when I had a minor surgery at 31, and couldn't tell my mother because my mother would have worried for 6 months. She was sitting beside me on a hospital chair, holding my left hand, the entire night my mother passed away in October of 2021. She did not let go until morning. That is who Sara was to me. And that is what makes this story not just a story about a husband who betrayed me, but about the specific layered 15-year depth of what was lost on that Thursday evening when I pushed open my front door and the room went silent. I was not naive. I want to be clear about that. I was not a woman who floated through her life on blind optimism. I was a corporate consultant. My entire professional existence was built on pattern recognition, on looking at data, behavior, and systems and identifying exactly where the failure points were. I was precise. I was observant. I kept notes. I asked follow-up questions. I did not take things at face value in any boardroom I walked into. But there is a particular blindness that comes from love. Not stupidity. Not weakness. Just the specific way that trust, when it is deep enough and long enough, stops looking for evidence, because the evidence has always been there and has always been good and there is no reason to look anymore. I had not looked. And in not looking I had missed things. Specific things. Things that, when I eventually sat alone in a Marriott hotel room and let myself go back through the last 18 months, arranged themselves into a pattern so clear, I couldn't understand how I had ever failed to see it. I hadn't been looking at the data. I had been looking at the people I loved. Turns out those are two entirely different things. Daniel was an architect at a mid-sized firm in the West Loop. Thoughtful, detail-oriented, the kind of man who remembered your coffee order and showed up on time. We had built a life that looked from the outside like the kind of life people work toward. Good apartment. Shared friends. Plans. I had been the one making most of the plans. I just hadn't known whose plans Daniel was making. What she should have seen. I have gone back and counted. Not obsessively, or maybe obsessively, I'm not sure anymore, but carefully. The way I would audit a client's operational history. Looking for the exact moments where the system showed signs of failure that someone, had they been paying attention, might have caught. There were at least 7. I am going to tell you 3. The first was 18 months before that Thursday. Daniel and I had plans on a Friday night. A restaurant in Wicker Park. I had made a reservation at 3 weeks in advance because the wait list was long and the food was supposed to be worth it. I had been traveling all week. I came home on a Friday afternoon specifically for this dinner. I showered, changed, put on the black dress Daniel had once said he liked, and came into the kitchen to find him on the phone. He held up one finger. I waited. He hung up 10 minutes later and said, "That was Sara. She's having a really hard night. She needs someone to talk to." I looked at him. She called you, I said. She couldn't reach you, he said. You were on the plane. That was true. I had been on the plane. I told her I'd go over, he said. He said it carefully, not apologetically, not defensively. Just carefully. The way you say something when you have already decided and you are simply informing rather than discussing. I said. We have a reservation, he said. She's our friend, Claire. Our friend. I remember that. Our friend. As though his willingness to cancel our anniversary dinner to go sit with Sara was evidence of his generous heart and not, as I now understand it, something else entirely. I called the restaurant and canceled. I ate leftover pasta alone at our kitchen island. Daniel came home at midnight. He smelled like her perfume. A warm amber scent she had worn for years that I had always associated with her specifically. I noticed it. I said nothing. I told myself I was being paranoid. I was not being paranoid. The second moment was approximately 11 months before that Thursday. I was traveling Dallas, I think, or possibly Denver. The cities blurred together after enough years. And I was going through my email on a Tuesday night when a notification came through on the joint credit card app we shared. A hotel charge. $218. The Kimpton Gray, downtown Chicago. A Tuesday night. Daniel was supposed to be home. He worked from home on Tuesdays. I called him. He answered on the second ring, calm, normal, slightly distracted. Hey, he said. Hey, I said. What are you up to? Just finishing up some drawings, he said. Quiet night. I looked at the notification on my screen. $218. The Kimpton Gray. 8:47 p.m. There's a charge on the joint card, I said. From a hotel downtown. One beat of silence. Then, oh, that's a work thing. Client dinner ran late. They had us book rooms through the firm card, but the system defaulted to mine. I'll get reimbursed. It was a perfectly reasonable explanation. The kind of explanation that is almost impossible to disprove in the moment. The kind that requires either trust or investigation. And I had spent 7 years building the first and had no appetite for the second. I said, okay. He said, miss you. I said, miss you too. I closed the app. The charge was never reimbursed. I know because 3 months later I went through the joint card statements looking for something unrelated. A business expense I needed to document, and I saw it sitting there unreimbursed, unreferenced, untouched. I made a mental note and then I let it go. I let it go. The third moment was 6 months before that Thursday, and it is the one I think about most. Not because it was the most obvious, it wasn't, but because it involves Sara directly, and because I saw it and understood it and chose to reframe it rather than face it. Sara had been posting less on Instagram. This sounds trivial. It wasn't. Sara had always been a consistent presence on social media. Not excessive, just regular. Brunches, walks, the occasional photo with friends. But over the course of about 4 months I had noticed that photos involving both me and Daniel had quietly disappeared from her grid. Not deleted dramatically. Just gone. Archived, I assumed. Cleaned up. People do that. What I didn't notice, what I only saw when I went back through her profile months later, sitting in that Marriott hotel room, was the specific pattern of what remained and what was removed. Photos of Sara and me still there. Photos of Sara alone still there. Photos of all three of us together gone. Every single one. She had been editing the evidence of a triangle into a pair of parallel lines. And I had looked at her feed, noticed something felt slightly different, and told myself I was being oversensitive. 3 moments. 18 months of a pattern I had all the data to read and chose instead to close. I was a woman who found failure points in broken organizations for a living. I had missed every single one in my own home. What they didn't know, what neither of them could have anticipated, was that I was very, very good at making up for lost time. The baby shower invitation. I stayed at the Marriott for 3 days. I want to be precise about that because people always assume the dramatic moment, the door, the silence, the couch, is the moment that breaks you. It wasn't. The door was shock. Shock is not the same as breaking. Shock is your nervous system buying you time. Breaking comes later, quieter. When the shock has cleared and what's left is just the plain, undecorated truth sitting in front of you with nowhere left to hide. I worked from the hotel. I had client deliverables due. I submitted them on time. I ordered room service, a club sandwich the first night, nothing the second, coffee and a croissant the third. I showered. I slept in 4-hour intervals. I did not call Daniel. I did not call Sara. I did not call my sister in Portland or my college roommate in New York or anyone who would have required me to say out loud what had happened, because saying it out loud would have made it fully real and I was not ready for it to be fully real. Daniel texted on the first night. A single message that said, "Claire, please call me." I read it. I did not respond. He called 4 times the following morning. I let every call go to voicemail. I did not listen to the voicemails. I still haven't. They are sitting in my phone right now, 3 years later, unheard. I don't know what he said and I have decided I don't need to. Sara did not text. Sara did not call. Not that first night, not the second. She called on the third day. My phone lit up with her name at 2:17 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. I was sitting at the small desk by the hotel window, looking at a spreadsheet I had been pretending to work on for 40 minutes. I watched her name on the screen through 4 full rings. Then I answered. She was crying before she said a word. The specific kind of crying that is not grief but is something closer to relief, as though she had been holding something so heavy for so long that the simple act of the call connecting had allowed her to put it down. "Claire," she said. I said nothing. "I need to tell you something," she said. "I need you to hear it from me." I waited. "I'm pregnant," she said. The spreadsheet on my laptop was still open. Column headers. Client data. Numbers in neat rows. I looked at it while she said the word. Pregnant. I looked at the numbers and I breathed through my nose and I said, very quietly, very evenly, "I have to go." And I hung up. I did not cry. I want to tell you I cried and I cannot because I didn't, not then, not in the hotel room. What I felt was something colder than crying. Something that settled into my chest like concrete setting. Heavy and permanent and very, very still. 2 weeks passed. I had moved back into the apartment by then. Daniel had taken a bag to his brother's place in Evanston without being asked, which told me everything I needed to know about how guilty he felt and how little he planned to fight. And I was living in our apartment alone, working, existing, waiting without knowing what I was waiting for. Then on a Wednesday morning in the 3rd week, I picked up my phone to check my calendar and saw a Facebook notification. I almost scrolled past it. I don't know why I didn't. Sara Novak's baby shower, hosted by Jennifer Marsh and Kelly Tran. Saturday, April 14th. RSVP by April 1st. I tapped it open. There was a guest list. A venue. A soft pink banner across the top of the event page with little illustrated bottles and rattles. And in the event description, in the section marked Celebrating Sara and his name, Daniel Hadley, listed right there. On a public Facebook event. As the father. I sat on my bathroom floor. I don't know exactly when I moved from the kitchen to the bathroom. I just know that at some point my legs stopped working properly and the floor seemed like the most honest place to be. I sat with my back against the bathtub and my phone face down on the tile and I looked at the wedding photo on the wall directly across from me. The one from the hallway, the large framed print we had ordered 6 months after the wedding because we liked it so much. Sara was in it. Standing directly beside me. Bouquet in hand. Smiling the way you smile when you mean it. I sat there for 2 hours. I did not call anyone. I did not text anyone. I did not get up and make tea or pour wine or do any of the things people do to soften difficult moments. I just sat there until the cold of the tile floor had worked its way through my clothes and into my bones. And then I stood up, washed my face, made coffee, opened my laptop and started working. Not on a client project. On Daniel. What the contracts revealed. I need to tell you something about what I do for a living. When a company calls Meridian Strategy Group, it is usually because something is wrong and they cannot figure out what. Revenue is declining. Teams are underperforming. A merger is failing. A process that should work isn't working and no one inside the organization can see clearly enough to identify why. They call us because they need someone with no emotional attachment to the structure, someone who can walk in, read the data without loyalty to any particular interpretation, and tell them exactly what is actually happening. That is what I do. I find what is actually there, not what people wish were there. I spent 11 years developing that skill professionally, and sitting at my kitchen table on a Wednesday night in March, with a cup of coffee going cold beside my laptop, I turned it, for the first time on my own life. I started with the joint accounts. Daniel and I had 3. A checking account for household expenses, a joint savings account we had been building toward a down payment on a house, and a joint investment account that we contributed to monthly. I had full access to all 3. I had always had full access. It had never occurred to me to look at them carefully because there had never been a reason to look carefully. There was a reason now. The checking account was unremarkable. Mortgage payments, utilities, groceries, the usual architecture of a shared life. I went back 24 months and found nothing that surprised me. The savings account was where it started to get interesting. We had an agreement, a specific spoken agreement from the first year of our marriage, that we would each contribute $1,500 per month to the joint savings. The account should have had, by my rough calculation, somewhere between $60,000 and $70,000 in it depending on interest. It had $31,400. I sat with that number for a long time. I went back through the deposit history. My contributions were consistent, $1,500 every month on the first without exception. Daniel's contributions were consistent through month 8. After that they became irregular. $800 one month. $500 the next. 3 months with nothing at all. Always a different amount, never the agreed figure, and never, I realized as I scrolled back through 18 months of history, ever accompanied by a conversation or an explanation. I had not noticed because I had not looked. I was looking now. I spent the next 2 hours searching for where the money had gone. It took me until nearly midnight to find it. Not in the joint accounts but in a document I found in the shared filing folder on our home computer. A folder labeled Archive 2022 that I had no reason to ever open because it sounded administrative and dull, and I trusted him. Inside the folder was a bank statement. A single statement printed as a PDF for an account I did not recognize. A personal savings account in Daniel's name only, at a different bank from our joint accounts. Opened in September of the same year, the hotel charge had appeared on our joint card. The balance on the statement was $47,200. I looked at that number for a very long time. Then I looked at the date the account was opened. September 14th. I opened my calendar and went back to September 14th of that year. I had been in Houston. A 3-week client engagement. I remember it specifically because it was the longest I had been away from home in a single stretch, and I had called Daniel every night and he had answered every night and told me he missed me. He had opened a private savings account the first week I was gone. I made a list of everything I now had. The $47,200 account. The 18 months of underpayment to our joint savings. Approximately $23,000 in missing contributions by my calculation. The hotel receipt. The timeline. The Facebook event with his name on it. Then I found one more thing. In the same archive folder, 3 files down from the bank statement, was a document I recognized immediately because I had signed a copy of it myself 5 years ago. Our prenuptial agreement. Daniel and I had signed a prenup at the insistence of my father, who was an attorney and who had very firm opinions about financial protection regardless of the emotional circumstances. At the time I had found it slightly unromantic. I had signed it anyway because my father was usually right about things like this. I opened it and read it carefully. All 11 pages. My father, it turned out, had been very thorough. The agreement contained a clause, a specific, clearly worded clause on page 7, that addressed financial misconduct during the marriage. Specifically, the deliberate concealment of assets or the redirection of joint funds without spousal knowledge or consent constituted a material breach of the agreement, and in the event of such a breach the non-offending party was entitled to a significantly increased share of marital assets in any subsequent divorce proceeding. I read that clause 3 times. Then I closed the laptop, picked up my phone, and searched for the best family law attorney in Chicago. I had a 9 a.m. appointment 2 days later. I had not told Daniel. What they didn't know was that I had stopped being a grieving wife somewhere around page 7. I was a consultant now, and I had just found the failure point. The quiet dismantling. Her name was Margaret Osei. She came recommended by 2 separate colleagues who had used her in their own divorces and described her, independently and using almost identical language, as someone you want on your side and very much do not want on the other side. She was 51 years old, she had been practicing family law in Chicago for 23 years, and when I walked into her office on a Friday morning and set my folder of documents on her desk, she put on her reading glasses, opened it, and did not say a word for 11 minutes. Then she looked up. "When did you find the account?" she said. "4 days ago," I said. "Does he know you found it?" "No." She nodded slowly. "Good," she said. "Let's keep it that way." What followed was 8 days of the most focused and deliberate work I have ever done. And I say that as someone who has restructured a $400 million healthcare organization in 11 weeks. The difference was that this time it was personal. Every document I pulled, every account I logged into, every statement I printed and added to the folder felt like something being returned to me. Not revenge. Something quieter than revenge. Clarity. The specific satisfaction of seeing a situation as it actually is rather than as you wished it were. Margaret's first instruction was documentation. Everything I had found needed to be formally recorded, time-stamped, and organized. I spent the first 2 days doing exactly that, building a file that mirrored the kind of audit report I would produce for a client. The hidden account with its opening date and current balance. The 18 months of underpayments to our joint savings, presented as a month-by-month comparison against our agreed contribution schedule. The hotel charge. The prenuptial clause. A printed copy of the Facebook event with Daniel's name listed as the father time-stamped. Margaret reviewed it on day 3 and said, "This is thorough." I said, "I do this for a living." She smiled for the first time. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm not worried." On day 4, Margaret filed a formal legal notice with Daniel's attorney, an attorney he had apparently retained the week after I left, which confirmed that his comeback, let's talk text had been running parallel to a legal strategy. The notice informed Daniel's counsel that I was aware of the concealed account, that I was in possession of documentation establishing a pattern of financial misconduct dating back 18 months, and that I intended to invoke the relevant clause of our prenuptial agreement in full. I was told his attorney called Margaret within 2 hours of receiving the notice. I was not present for that call. Margaret relayed it to me that evening with the specific neutrality of someone who has delivered difficult news so many times it no longer registers on her face. "He didn't know you had access to the archive folder," she said. "He forgot," I said. "People do," she said, "especially when they're managing a great many things at once." On day 5, I contacted our mortgage provider. My name was primary on the mortgage, a fact that had been unremarkable for 5 years and was suddenly very relevant. I made a formal inquiry about my options as the primary account holder in the event of a separation. The conversation was informative. On day 6, I separated my personal accounts. I moved my direct deposit. I closed my access to the joint discretionary card and opened a personal account at a different bank. I did this quietly, procedurally, without drama. On day 7, I called my father. He listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, there was a pause. Not the pause of shock, but the pause of a man organizing his thoughts precisely before he speaks. "You have the prenup," he said. "I have the prenup," I said. "And the account documentation." "And the account documentation." Another pause. Then, "Margaret Osei is handling it?" "Yes." "Good," he said. "You'll be all right." It was the most my father had ever said to me with so few words. On day 8, I sent Daniel a text message. One message. 11 words. "I've spoken to an attorney. You'll be hearing from her." He called 4 times in the following 20 minutes. Then 6 more times over the course of that afternoon. Then twice that evening. I did not answer a single call. I had said what needed to be said. 11 words, clean and precise, with nothing wasted and nothing left ambiguous. I had spent my entire career learning that the most powerful communication is the kind that requires no follow-up. He left 3 voicemails. I did not listen to them. I was done listening to things that weren't true. That night I made dinner in my apartment, our apartment, though it was becoming mine in ways he didn't yet fully understand, and I sat at the kitchen table and ate it while it was still warm, which was something I hadn't done in longer than I could remember. And I slept for the first time in 3 weeks, for 7 uninterrupted hours. The fallout and the freedom. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in October. 7 months for negotiation sessions, 2 amended settlement proposals, and 1 very uncomfortable deposition in which Daniel was asked, under oath, to explain the origin and purpose of a $47,200 savings account his wife had not known existed. I was not in the room for that deposition. Margaret was. She told me afterward that he had been very quiet for most of it. I imagine he was. The settlement, when it was finalized, reflected the prenuptial clause in full. The apartment, primary mortgage holder, my name, my credit, my 7 years of on-time payments stayed with me. The joint savings account, which should have contained $67,000 by our original contribution agreement and contained $31,400 due to 18 months of Daniel's underpayments, was divided with an adjustment that accounted for the documented shortfall. The concealed $47,200 account was treated as a marital asset subject to disclosure requirements he had violated. Margaret was very precise about this, and factored into the final settlement accordingly. I am not going to tell you the exact number. What I will tell you is that my father, when Margaret called him with the final figure, said, "That's fair." And my father has never in his life described anything as more than it deserved. Daniel moved into a 1-bedroom in Evanston. I know this not because I tracked him but because we had mutual friends who told me without being asked, the way mutual friends always do in the aftermath of these things, unsure of whose side they are on and compensating by offering information to both. Most of those mutual friends, as it turned out, were not as mutual as I had believed. Within 3 months of the divorce being finalized, without any campaign or conversation on my part, the social geometry of our shared circle had quietly reorganized itself. Sara lost 2 of her closest friends from our shared group, women who had been invited to her baby shower and who, upon learning the full timeline of events, quietly declined to attend. I know this because one of them called me afterward and said simply, "I'm sorry we didn't see it sooner." I told her there was nothing to see until there was. That was true. And it was also, I realized as I said it, the most generous thing I had said about the entire situation. Daniel's firm did not fire him. I want to be accurate, I never contacted his firm, never made any professional move against him, never used any of the leverage I had in that direction. The architecture world in Chicago is smaller than it appears from the outside, however, and people talk. And by early spring there were people in his professional circle who knew the outline of what had happened. Whether that affected him professionally I cannot say with certainty. I only know that the senior partnership track he had been on when we were married had not materialized by the time I stopped paying attention. The watch is still in its box, wrapped in navy blue tissue paper, sitting on the top shelf of my bedroom closet, exactly where I placed it the night I came home from the Marriott and found the apartment empty and finally completely mine. I have not opened it. I have not returned it. I have not given it away. I keep it there because it reminds me of something important. Not of him, not of what I lost, but of the version of me who spent 3 months planning a perfect anniversary for someone who had already decided she wasn't enough. She was always enough. She just loved the wrong people with the right kind of heart. I want to say something directly to you before I go. If you have ever been the one who planned everything, the trips, the dinners, the anniversaries, the surprises, while someone else was quietly planning their exit, I want you to hear this. Your effort was not stupidity. Your trust was not weakness. Your love was not the problem. The problem was never you. I spent a long time after that Thursday evening asking myself what I had missed. Going back through the hotel receipts and the Instagram posts and the canceled dinner and the phone calls and asking myself, how did I not see it? I am a professional pattern recognizer. I find failure points for a living. How did I miss every single one of these? And the answer, when I finally stopped being angry at myself long enough to hear it, was simple. I wasn't looking for failure. I was looking at the people I loved. And there is nothing wrong with that. There is nothing naive or foolish about choosing to look at the people in your life with love rather than suspicion. The failure was not mine. The failure belonged entirely to the two people who looked back at me with clear eyes and chose, repeatedly over 18 months, to let me keep trusting them. That is not a reflection of my judgment. That is a reflection of their character. I know that now. And some mornings, not all of them but some, I wake up in my apartment in my bed, in the quiet that is entirely my own, and I feel something I did not expect to feel on the other side of all of this. Grateful. Not for what happened, for who I became because of it. If this story stayed with you, if something in Claire's story felt uncomfortably familiar, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me. Which moment hit you hardest? Was it the door? The 3 days of silence? The notebook, the Facebook notification? The prenup clause on page 7? Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me what you've carried that you haven't named yet. Tell me what you finally saw that you've been explaining away. This community exists because these stories matter, not as entertainment, but as evidence that you can walk through something that should have destroyed you and come out the other side sharper, clearer, and more fully yourself than you were before. If you're new here, subscribe. Turn on notifications. A new story goes up every single week. And if you know someone who needs to hear this one today, send it to them. No explanation needed. They'll know why.